Hi, everybody. My name's Elish Mistry, and I'm a solutions engineer here at Rivery, based in London. Thanks for joining me today. So, in this session, we're going to talk about the pros and cons of building your own data pipelines. So, like it's a conversation that I have all the time with prospects, and when I meet people at events, where what is the value in actually having a external party deliver data pipeline solutions for you, and why can we not just build it inside our own organization? We can build tailored data pipelines which meet our use cases. What's the advantages and disadvantages? So let's go to the agenda. So in terms of the agenda today, what we're going to do is going to do a quick short intro in what Rivery is, and then we're going to go through and really unpack the question whether to code or not to code. And also what we'll do is we'll try to include a short demo of Rivery as well. If I can work out how to share my screen in the demo, I'll kind of give a quick overview of Rivery as well there. Okay, and finally, what we'll do is kind of also talk about a quick Q&A in terms of reaching out to me later, or we've got a booth session where we can talk about um, the advantages and disadvantages of using something like Rivery. So let's go ahead. First of all, quick introduction into Rivery. We're a full SaaS ELT platform. We help customers deliver data, move data across their platform. We were kind of founded in 2019, so very recently, really. But we were found the difference in Rivery was that we were founded out of a consultancy, and this consultancy was essentially building solutions for their customers and their prospects, and they were seeing deficiencies in the market. And rather than actually go to the kind of the plethora of tools or choose one, they actually chose to build a solution which essentially solved a number of problems, because they had a choice between legacy ETL tools which were kind of managed on premise. They had to manage the infrastructure, and the customers had to worry about so many other things rather than just move their data, or they could move to essentially the modern data stack, which was essentially a selection of tools. So it was like either legacy or loads of tools to solve essentially just a simple problem of moving their data. And they found the only solution was to build their own solution. And that's where Rivery was born, essentially. And essentially the kind of the concept of Rivery, and we'll go through this in more detail, is that it is kind of solving that problem of um, moving data. So it deals with ingestion, transformation, deals with orchestrating the flows. So you're not seeing the world as a set of point-to-point integrations, and then finally those extra tasks that you want to do once the data's in the warehouse, about data activation and also reverse ETL. So Rivery was kind of encompassing a larger data integration problem that it saw in the market. So again, you'll see kind of that we're number one rated on G2 for customer support, because having been born out of that consultancy, it's super important that we are, we make our customers successful. So we kind of really do make sure that we're part of that journey, not just pre-sale, but as an ongoing basis post-sale as well. So what we've got here is I've worked in the data space for a number of years now, and what we try to do with this with these next set of slides is really nail down a set of principles that was going to be important when we're talking about the modern data pipeline. Okay, so I've broken it down to 7 principles essentially. So let's go through the first one. First of all, is probably like a super important one. If I'm a retailer, and part of my business is to sell kind of clothing or some other item, then I don't really want to have to worry about, or my team have to worry about, building an infrastructure to run my pipelines. because essentially my whole key is just to get the data into somewhere that I can understand what's going on in my business. So the first principle is not having any infrastructure to manage, because it's not just about the infrastructure, it's not just about the cost of the infrastructure, it's about maintaining that infrastructure as well. It's about what happens if the infrastructure goes down. What if it's becoming slow? What if it needs patching? What if there's a critical security patch that needs to be installed? It's everything around it. And what we normally talk about is that, as well as having data engineers, if you're managing your own infrastructure, then you've got to have at least 1.5 people looking after that infrastructure, and that's an additional cost as well. So infrastructures, no infrastructure to manage is an important part of that process. So let's go to the next one, ELT first. This one's this one's a super important one, and this is a conversation that's still ongoing, especially when you talk about those legacy ETL tools as well. ELT first is about realizing that if I can grab my data, move it to a warehouse, and never have and address my any questions I want on the data from there, then that's surely better than answering a question on Monday with some data, g- going going to my data set and saying, oh, actually, I'm missing some data. I'm going to have to revisit my integration, build another integration, run that, and then deliver that data on Wednesday. So it's a case of moving your mindset to that ETL where you're just grabbing a subset of the data, moving it to your warehouse, to a mindset, well, now warehouse storage costs are super cheap. It's kind of moved on from that legacy mindset. So let me grab all my data, let me move it into a warehouse in a really straightforward way, such that all my data engineers, my analysts, can interrogate the data in one place and have it refresh constantly. And that's the ELT first mentality. Okay, the next one is SQL and Python as standard. Now, this one's an interesting one, because obviously there's lots of tools that kind of have different approaches when you're talking about interrogating data. But what we've realized, and I've realized, is that SQL and Python are almost universal languages. They're becoming the analyst kind of in the analyst tool set. So if you've got an ability, if you want to interrogate data, then that's pretty much got to be in your back pocket. If you've onboarded a warehouse, a modern cloud data warehouse, you're going to have these skills in your back pocket. So essentially, having the ability to interrogate data for reports using SQL, and then also have that extensibility in interrogation with a language like Python, where you can embellish the data, where you can consider training models, etc. Having those kind of basic principles as part of your um, ELT tool is going to be important. Maybe not for today when you're just moving the data and reporting on it, but as you kind of mature as a business and you want to understand what are the best times of day to sell a particular product, then you can actually bring in those Python models into your pipeline to make sure that you're kind of utilizing your data in the best way. Multiple storage layers. This is important because it's not just about which cloud data warehouse you pick today. It's about having the kind of future proofing your kind of landscape such that you can move between data warehouses as well. Because on day one, you may want a simple data warehouse like AWS Postgres, where it's essentially a transactional database to do your reporting from, but you may want to introduce something like Spark into your warehouse, and therefore you may want to move. So having the ability to be able to have a flexible solution to address those different problems, that's an important part of it. And also, it's not just a one-to-one ratio. You can actually have multiple warehouses, so you can have multiple sources, but you can also have multiple targets as well to satisfy those different use cases. And something that's flexible enough to accommodate that, that's really important as you kind of build and mature your business. So number five, we've got going past the cloud data warehouse. Now, this was a few years ago. I actually, like I actually didn't even hear about reverse ETL. It was all about creating that single source of truth. So actually, I've got data in my ticketing system. I've got it in my finance system. I've got it in my HCM. I've got it in my CRM. I need to grab that data so I can, first of all, understand what's happening in my business. Secondly, I can understand my customer better. So you can imagine, like the basis of any conversation around customer 360 is important when you've got a single source of truth. But once you've got that data in your warehouse, you increasingly realize that it's valuable. And therefore, having an ability to take that data out of the warehouse and activate other work streams and also refresh your sources. And what I mean by that is that if you've got data coming out of Salesforce, you've got it out of NetSuite, you've got it out of Zendesk, and there's an element of the data which is you're collecting it in your single source of truth, and it's different. If you've understood what the master data is, so say for example, your master data record was in your CRM, you can now take that data from the master record in your warehouse and refresh the other sources such that your data coming in to your reporting system is actually improving as well. So, it's a horrible term, I know, garbage in, garbage out. But if you can start improving that data coming into your warehouse in the first place, then over time, you'll actually improve the quality of the reporting as well. So reverse ETL, it's like I said, it's definitely something that we're seeing more and more in the market. And that's a core principle of what Rivery is delivering for its customers as well. So we've got number six, which is transparent. Now, this one kind of stems from the ability of like understanding what's happening in your data transfer. Do you understand that? First of all, did my data refresh? Um, and also, it's not a case of having to log on to the platform to understand that. Can I be notified if something went wrong? That's a key, because it's gone are the days where you log on, like you kind of somebody strolls in at 8 a.m. in the morning, they look at a dashboard and they see it's horribly red. That's not what you want, because you know that the data needs to be ready for 9 a.m. reporting or a management meeting. So you need to understand quickly and efficiently what's happening in your data stack. And having a tool that's going to not only orchestrate the flow so it's more maintainable, but also notify you when something's gone wrong, where an API has not delivered the data for a particular use case. That's important as well. So that transparency and data observability is an important part of that modern data stack. And it's more important because ELT, that low code solution is essentially creating a kind of, it's encapsulating a lot of the complexity. And therefore, that encapsulation also leads to, I don't know what's happening under the bonnet. Now, if you've got a tool that's giving you those kind of plug points where you can understand what's happening, that's going to be a great advantage going forward as well. So let's go to the next one. The final one is all about managing via data ops as well. So increasingly, what we're finding is that customers want a tool that's going to deliver their data, but they also want a tool that's going to integrate with their software development lifecycle. And that's an important part of it. So whether it's API first approach, whether it's having Ansible scripts or Terraform scripts, which are essentially calling the API to create your workflows, or whether it's something that's integrates with GitHub, or even actually has an inbuilt tool which allows you to deploy pipelines between environments. It's a flexible tool that allows companies to integrate with their way of doing things, because um, for most of our prospects, what we find is that they've got a method of doing it already. But what they've got to a point of is that they want to kind of um, do it better and do it more efficiently and do it more cost effectively. But you also want a tool that's going to kind of integrate into your current software practice as well. And that's an important part of what we see as that modern data pipeline. So, just to summarize what we've talked about there, we've talked about the modern data principles. So, it's just a set of principles that myself and the team have come up with, but it's essentially understanding what's involved and what we see as important when you're kind of considering a tool to kind of integrate into your landscape, and also the factors that you've got to consider when you're thinking about onboarding a new tool as well. So let's go to the a popular implementation here. So this is like a code-based approach. So in terms of a code-based approach, what we're thinking is something that you're going to have to. So one of the options is I'm going to build something myself, right? Even though I sell, let's say for example, I sell t-shirts. I said that because of the recent article about ChatGPT. They said that the best um, um, retail business will be selling organic cotton t-shirts. So say for example, I'm going to sell t-shirts, but I've got marketing sources. I've got a CRM for all, like what's happening in my business. I've got a HCM for all my staff. So I've got all these sources, but I've decided to build a tool to get data out of there, and I'm going to pull it into my Redshift data warehouse. So what I'm going to do first is that I'm going to hire a data engineer that probably kind of understands what they are talking about, and we're going to go for an open source approach. So we're going to use something like Airflow. They're going to grab the data from these sources. They're going to have to understand what's in the data. They're going to have to understand how to get data out of there. We've got files, we've got databases, we've got lots of applications that we want to grab data out of. And then what we're going to do is we're going to land that data in an S3 bucket, and so essentially creating a data lake. And then subsequently, we're going to move it into Redshift. So we've got some ability to interrogate that data in, using SQL essentially. And then we'll also have some kind of dashboarding application, which is sitting on top of Redshift. So lot to do, right? Like when you talk about the kind of complexities of understanding how to take data out in the best way, how to orchestrate the flow of data, how to manage those APIs, how to paginate through vast APIs which are grabbing loads of data, having to disassemble JSON and XML code. Like I've got this data engineer that can do all of that. And then once I've got that data engineer building those pipelines, I've also got him or her to understand their dashboarding application to essentially um, create a way of interrogating that data and displaying that data in a straightforward way. So that's the kind of things I've got to think about if I'm onboarding somebody, and also the different considerations in managing all those sources as well. So like I can do it myself, right? Like it should be straightforward. I've never done it before, but how hard can it be? Like, and essentially it's that kind of approach that you'd have to consider if you're building a code-based application. You're going out of your comfort zone, you're a retailer, but these are all the considerations that you've got to essentially manage. So what do you actually need when you talk about a data pipeline? So let me just go to my next slide here. So this builds out, I think. So find the API documentation. So I'm a developer, right? So essentially, when I've recently onboarding and done POCs for a number of customers where they want a custom connector or they want a native connector. If you were building this yourself, then the first thing you'd do, you'd have to crack open the API documentation, understand what data you want, understand how you're going to get it, understand how you're going to interrogate it, understand the endpoints, and say, oh, actually, I don't need that bit of the data from that endpoint, but I need to blend it with another bit of data from an endpoint. So there's so many considerations that you've got to think about when you're just looking at what data to grab. And then you've got to authenticate. And this is not a straightforward process. So, like essentially, you're lucky if people use an OAuth2 method or a basic auth method or a bearer token method. But sometimes you have JWT tokens that you need to create as well. So there's loads of weird and wonderful ways that APIs want you to authenticate. I've even seen where you've actually they've people wanted some human interaction when they actually want to authenticate to their APIs as well. So there is so many different ways that you can have to worry about when you're authenticating to your APIs. Handle the endpoint payload. This one's a big one, right? This one's like, I've got my data, I've authenticated, I've grabbed my data. Now, how am I going to build the schema from it? Because you need to get from essentially this mess of JSON to somewhere, to some kind of schema that you can interrogate the data from. And if that's not difficult enough, it's all about understanding what types you need to do. So on day one, a field could be delivering integers, but on day two, that field could suddenly start delivering strings. How do you accommodate that change? And and essentially, if you've got integer in your workflow, and you're depending on some report that's hanging off that data, that report's going to break if suddenly you start delivering strings into that data set. Build an EL data pipeline to the lake or warehouse. So you've considered all of the points about connecting to that data source. You've now got understood how to interrogate that payload. Now you need to string it all together. And you don't need to just string it together. You need to schedule it. You need to understand how to schedule it, how's it gonna handle time zones, how's it gonna handle the incremental load. That's in tiny writing on the slide, but how can I manage an API and only grab the incremental updates? So how can I grab in updates from 24 hours ago? So all of these things, and managing schema drift, again, a small bullet point, but it's so important to understand how you're going to cope with APIs changing. And finally, you've got to think about those extra use cases. So I've managed to get to a point where I'm now delivering the data from maybe 4 or 5 sources into my warehouse. But what about if somebody said, okay, we want to understand how to introduce a machine learning model? And actually, Elish, that data in the warehouse is amazing. What we want to do is use it to start refreshing our sources, or we want to kind of, move that data somewhere else, or we want to activate it. So it's you're starting that journey again of having to not only learn how to do it, but as a developer. So say for example, like when I started off development, it wasn't just about getting the job done. It was like, even if it works on day one, how can you assure it's best practice? How can you assure it's more efficient? How can you assure it's making sure that you consume your Snowflake credits less? So you're worried about warehouse performance as well. And this is where a no code solution is really that different data point, where you can actually say that this is a tool that's catered for all of these circumstances and delivered that back to you in something that you can just pick up off the shelf and use. And you've got native sources. They've taken care of all those steps for you, and also you've got a tool which is flexible enough. So I'm just going to do a very quick demo. So let me just see if I can move this over and get that working. So let's see if you can see that demo there. Okay, so I don't think you can actually. So what this is essentially showing us is, let me just, okay, so I think my slide transition is not working, but essentially what Rivery is doing is that it's doing that creation of source to target rivers in a very straightforward way. So we call integrations or pipeline rivers. But what this demo is essentially showing you, that in a very brief number of steps, you can actually take a source, deliver that data into a target, and then also have the ability to do post-load transformations with something we call our logic integrations or logic rivers. We can also schedule our orchestrations, and then we've also got action rivers, which allow you to build custom flows as well in a really straightforward way. So again, as Taylor said in one of the earlier talks, we've got Python as a service in our logic rivers as well. So we deliver that. So how to speed up the parts that require code? So this one's a a super important one. It's all about having the ability, having a tool which is flexible enough to not only deliver what you need 80% of the time, that 80/20 rule. I need to get my data out of my sources and deliver that into a target. But it's also about having something that's flexible enough to run custom pipelines, create custom connectors, and run Python code as well. So what is the cost? So this is important. Like if you're talking about coding, then you need to think about additional development. 4 to 12 to 2 to 14 weeks to onboard a new source. Ongoing maintenance you've got to consider as well. With no code, it's nothing like that time. You're onboarding new sources within hours. So in terms of the sunk cost, this is where you've got like if you want to move from HubSpot to Salesforce, then all that time that you previously spent has been lost. That's a sunk cost. And a POC cost is where you're essentially losing time by actually having to take time to onboard new sources as well. And when you consider the salary of a data engineer is $115,000 a year, you're not just going to need one. You're going to need one to cover the other when they go on holiday as well, and potentially even if they leave, you've got to have some backup there as well. So the cost of coding is not insufficient. Okay, so let's go to our next one there as well. So yeah, in terms of this, what we've got here is like our estimated costing of coding, 32 to $220,000 a year. And in terms of no code, these tools like Rivery are actually giving you the same value, but for just a fraction of the cost of what you're getting with a team of data engineers who are having to not actually bring value to your business, but just get data into a warehouse. And that's the real key there. The short answer is, do you want your data engineers to analyze the data, or do you want them to have to worry about getting the data in your warehouse in the first place? So Rivery is that advanced data integration. It's delivering it in a super simple way. You've got the ability to create source to target rivers within seconds, but also you've got those um, you know target points inside your platform that allow you to run Python, that allow you to build custom connectors without having to go to something like code it using AWS Lambda, or having to go to another tool to build those custom functions. You can do it directly within Rivery using our action rivers. And also you've got the confidence that you've got infrastructure as a service. So you'd never have to phone Rivery up to say, I'm going to run 1,000 jobs this week, or I've got 10 jobs this week. Can you scale down or can you scale up? You're just paying for what you use, and that makes it super efficient. Yeah, so a couple of quotes from our customers. I think that the main reason why these were picked was the second one is super important. It really rang home to me. You know, rather than hiring two more developers, I've been able to build all these pipelines on my own. And that's the beauty of Rivery. Our enablement sessions are just a matter of hours, and people can start delivering data into their warehouse, in a really straightforward way. And finally, I've kind of run out of time now, but essentially we've got our Q&A in our booth as well. So I'd love to give you that demo. It would be great to show you the value of what Rivery can bring. But yeah, thanks for listening, and I hope to speak to you soon.